That was amazing.
That clip, taken straight from Baldur's Gate 3, is an accurate description for the game itself. It's a deep, lavish, intricately told tale that can at times leave you drowning in RPG ecstasy. It's just as likely to leave a lingering taste of wanting more that may never be sated. That's my long way of saying that this game hits something different. Arriving on PC on the 3rd of August 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 spent quite a while in early access and had over 6 years in development. It required a considerable amount of effort on my part not to get a taste of this during that alpha period, and instead I did wait until the official release. For those of you whose PCs are more for school and work than gaming, ports of this are coming to other platforms. Eventually. As things stand, PlayStation 5 owners will get this in September, while the Xbox Series port is also in development, but with no official date yet. This was billed as a deep and choice-driven RPG, using the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rules adapted to work as a video game. From a purely video game perspective, this title was appealing enough, without any prior context or familiarity with D&D, and I had faith in myself, but I'd just sort of figure out the rest along the way. Baldur's Gate 3 follows the story of the player character, who can be heavily customized in a strong character creator. I chose to use one of the game's origin characters, essentially pre-made entities, rather than customize my own in the hope that it would include some additional elements as part of the story. Each of these characters has a voiced introduction, and I listened to all of these before deciding who to play as. These opening snippets are a positive start. These are presented strongly and emphasize the attention to detail that has gone into this game. Rather than just flashing up text on your screen with a backstory, these are fully voiced. I chose my character, somewhat unaware at the time that I had picked a vicious, sociopathic serial killer. This feels like a good point to drop in that this game is rated 18+ by Peggy, and it does absolutely earn that rating. The story begins with the player a captive aboard a Mind Flayer ship, one crash landing later, and you've ended up with a parasite stuck in your head and a handful of tadpoled companions to whom you are psionically linked. To oversimplify the story massively, you go on one long quest to try and get the parasite out of your head before it kills you and turns you into a Mind Flayer. As stories go, it's pretty easy to follow and provides a justifiable reason for sticking with a group of characters who range from endearing to unlikable and arrogant. You progress the story and stagger, stumble and brawl your way towards the titular city of Baldur's Gate to track down the leaders of a cult who are likely behind this whole thing. The adventure took me around 70 hours to finish, but given the amount of choice available in this game, you could easily half or double that value for a single playthrough. Perhaps the most prominent thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is the characters, and in particular, character writing. Your companions are complex and deep, and when you think you have a good read on them in the early game, you really don't. Take for instance the handsome mage Gale, who you rescue by pulling out of a magic portal. He comes across as a reckless flirt with an interest in magic, but pull at the threads a little, and you learn that his grasp on the weave is crumbling. Then there's the mysterious Shadowheart, who has all the red flags associated with the bland and boring primary love interest. But once you dig into her past and finish her story arc, you will feel different. There's also simple and wholesome characters like blunt and forthright Karlach, who I can already tell will end up being a fan favourite because she's a character with both a lot of heart and at times none at all. There are other non-origin characters who can join your adventure too, with a strong selection for any type of playthrough. Yet, the character that perhaps best demonstrates my point is the one I meant when I said unlikable and arrogant earlier. That character is Lae'zel.
I am a child of Gith, not discarded rat flesh. Am I not due your respect?
She is a proud and purposeful Gith warrior, and was heavily featured in the opening cutscene. You meet her at the very beginning of the game, and learn quickly that she's very prickly. She gets worked up easily and has no real self-awareness, which only heightens some of the worst parts of her selfish personality. The truth is that I found her to be a chore to have around. I felt like I was always having to tiptoe nearby and watch what I said when she was in my party to avoid angering her. It was only when I questioned why I was doing this that I realised just how good of a character she really is. Somehow she'd managed to become a constant in my avatar's life, that I was adapting to her quirks. I believed her to be so real that I'd overlooked the fact that this was a game and could just remove her from the party. The writing for each and every one of these characters cannot be understated, but they're also helped greatly by the veteran talent providing their voices. Household names like Jason Isaacs and Matt Mercer feature in the cast, but it was former Hollyoaks actor Devorah Wilde, who lends her voice to Lae'zel, that stood out. She made the most unlikable character in the game one of the most interesting, and that can't have been an easy feat at all. Every other companion character is unique in their own way. Each of their personal stories and quests evolve as you make decisions that have a meaningful impact going forwards, sometimes changing the character's physical appearance, and at other times changing their fate entirely. With each of these characters, like the main story, you must make choices. This is the key driving force of this game, and as you progress, choices you made previously may come back to aid you or haunt you at different points. The entire third act, which takes place in the titular city, is rife with the results of your actions. There are hundreds of small decisions you've made throughout Acts 1 or 2 that change what happens in this city. Depending on how you feel about this type of game, my next point may infuriate you or intrigue you, and it's to do with the decisions that you make. Every time I made a choice in Baldur's Gate 3, I never felt like I made the right choice. I believe this is a very deliberate use of storytelling throughout the game, as there was never an option that seemed to be the universal correct one. I don't mean that in terms of good or evil, simply that in this world filled with characters lurking in the shades of grey of morality, so is your character, and what this game does brilliantly is give you a choice that seems very simple on the surface, but will have some unseen weight behind it, and may ultimately cause you to regret your decision.
Do not be ashamed, child. What I see in your eyes, in your soul, is only natural.
I believe that the game being able to create that feeling in me, to be able to force me to live with the consequences and in many ways learn from them, is part of this game's true genius, and a testament to the writing and the way that these choices are presented to you. Of course, if you are cut from the perfectionist mold, you might find this utterly annoying. If you fall into the latter camp, then play this game like you would an XCOM title, and get very familiar with quick save and quick load. I could probably write over 10,000 words on just story and characters alone, but I think I've made my point, so I'm going to move on to gameplay now. This is a top-down RPG where you use your mouse to click and navigate for your character. Movement out of combat is primarily in real time, although you can switch to a turn-based approach at any point. Your avatar and companions explore the world, stumbling into interesting places or striking out in a specific direction when you need to take care of a threat or investigate a specific area. You progress across the map, level up your characters, and eventually resolve key story points to progress to the next area and take care of the next threat, so on and so forth. These maps are instanced, and they are a good size too. They're large, but not intimidatingly so. They are rich with hidden corners and secrets, mysterious NPCs, and hidden dialogue that you won't come across if you don't have certain abilities or pass certain checks. Lots of games make the claim that you'll see something new on your second or third playthrough. Baldur's Gate might be the first game I'd trust to back that up, as I can already tell I haven't seen everything. As this is a game based on the D&D mechanics, leveling up works a little different to how I'm used to in RPGs. You don't gain points to spend and increase your attributes as you level up. Rather, you gain more health and more spells, abilities, and feats. Gear has rarity, but doesn't have levels, so you can equip anything that you possess. This game is very good at giving you these pieces of gear as reward for your actions, and as you invest more time in the game, you gradually get better and better gear. Unlike some RPGs, you can't gain all the benefits from an item unless your character has proficiency in it. Your character and your companions can be reclassed at any point in the game, so if their default class doesn't work for you, this can be changed, and proficiencies themselves can be gained by choosing certain feats when you level up. These D&D mechanics were the biggest hurdle I had to overcome when I started playing. and while I'm not into the tabletop game, I do wish I knew more about its mechanics before I started. The game is okay at teaching you how to move and interact with the world, but it's very bad at teaching you how to play Dungeons & Dragons. Unfortunately, it really needed to do the latter as well. I tried to make a balanced party using my video game knowledge, and ended up picking a fighter, a sorcerer, a rogue, and a priest. But my priest wasn't the powerful healer I imagined, and had a lot of seemingly useless spells. My fighter wasn't the tank I expected, and seemed to be more tailored to dishing out damage than taking it. I also didn't understand how much impact subclasses can have, or gameplay concepts like long and short rests, advantage and disadvantage, the spell slot system, initiative, concentration, and preparing spells. For a very basic overview, everything in this game is controlled by dice rolls. These happen when you're exploring, when you're speaking to people in the game, or when you're in combat. Some of these are visible by default, and you can clearly see that you've failed to reach the right number. Others, you'll just get a notification that says you passed or failed. These are all mechanics that someone with real-world D&D experience would know, and it's fair to say that a lot of those playing this game will be D&D veterans. But there will also be a lot of players who aren't. I feel a lot of people who lack that experience, myself included, are going to have a very rough start to the game, or end up going to external sites for help and guidance. Let me step away from objectivity here and say that I personally loved this. I love seeing something I've not before and having a chance to learn things like new mechanics and systems. I relished absorbing everything I could on the subject and seeing my newfound know-how pay off in combat. But from the perspective of your average player, this is an immense skill wall to climb with barely any in-game assistance, and it might negatively affect the immersion process that this game needs to sell its magnificent story. This issue comes across more clearly in combat. Combat is turn-based, and is quite similar to the system used in Larian's Divinity Original Sin 2. Your characters can move a certain distance, use abilities and spells, and attack based on a percentage chance to hit. Attacks are just rolls too, with some being a roll to see if you actually hit the target, and then another for how much damage. There are then additional dice rolled for special effects and abilities. It's very fair to say that even on the game's normal, balanced difficulty, you will die, pun intended, because of rolls not going your way. Battles are also about the environment you're in and what you can do to affect or change it. Gaining the high ground is important for ranged characters, and changing the ground to fire, water, acid, or another environmental effect can help you control the battlefield and keep your enemy restricted. This also works in reverse too, as your foes can do the same to you. I noticed a real change in how I felt about this game as I progressed. I found the early game combat a bit basic and tiresome. I didn't have a lot of choice at that point. I was mostly just using basic attacks and hoping my hits would land, with not many options that could help increase my odds. This gets better as you unlock more and more skills, abilities, and spells. By the mid-game, I'd really got into the combat. I had a team I liked, I had a good mix of abilities and coverage, and I'd figured out most of the mechanics so that I was effective at playing the game. I was fighting what felt like tough enemies, but still holding my own. Combat really peaked between level 8 and level 10, and it's around here that you really see how these systems mesh together and create rewarding gameplay. This is also around the time where you start to get some powerful, legendary, and very rare items too, so you can make your party and your companions and friends feel really effective. I did feel that combat faltered in the final act, where my character was at this game's level cap, level 12. At this point, your character kit is ridiculously powerful, but I always felt restricted by the game's action economy. You can deploy 4 characters in your party, and each one gets an action and a bonus action. Some characters can attack multiple times, and others can cast multiple spells, but this feels very restrictive. This seems to be mostly a result of encounter design, where enemies not only outnumber you, but do so by a significant margin. And at most, I can make between 8 and 10 actions consistently a turn, with some variation if you burn consumables. It's difficult to deal with the enemy numbers that are presented to you here, even if each character has an AoE, as you need to avoid some hits and get the right rolls just to manage the fights. You can summon other entities in this game, from spirit weapons to risen undead, but I don't feel I should be forced to bring a necromancer with me just to be viable and meet the numerical odds. There are 2 specific points in Act 3, one where you finish Shadowheart's story and one on your way to finish the Dark Urges, where you are outnumbered heavily and start with a terrain disadvantage. I had to reload each encounter several times and save scum for rolls to make it past these. The other element of late game combat that is caused by this same problem is that turns take a long time to complete. There's just a lot of entities on screen, and while some enemies take their turns simultaneously, there seems to be a bug or an unnecessary delay that triggers fairly often. You are a passenger for a lot of this combat while you are waiting for your enemies to move, and that's just not fun. This is more than tolerable when there are a few enemies, or if your turn is coming up soon. But through the weird delay bug, or just the sheer number of enemies that get their turn before you, this can be a real drag. What helped me push through all of this was the desire to see this game finish a story thread that it started. I was never disappointed with the outcome of one of these stories, even when things went horribly wrong. This game shows time and time again that good writing and good characters can overcome a lot. For the sheer volume of writing here, it's insane how much of it is voiced, and how much of it is grammatically perfect. I spotted very few mistakes or text bugs on my playthrough, which is a testament to the team who put this together. Let's briefly talk about performance. This game tried its best to run at a rock-solid 60 FPS in 4K, but did suffer from frequent 99th percentile drops and some frame stuttering. This would have been an absolute killer if this were a faster-paced game like an action RPG, but the manner in which this game handles exploration and the turn-based nature of the combat help cover up this issue. This would certainly be playable at 30 FPS. I did see more frequent performance issues in the third act, particularly when zoomed out far and navigating the camera. The frame rate dropped well into the 20s as I activated new areas of the map. This is a little concerning, just because I have high-end consumer parts in my system and up-to-date drivers. My best guess would be that this is because the city is the part of the game that has to account for so many of your previous choices and decide what to render in and not render in, particularly when it comes to certain assets, characters and events. This puts a lot of pressure on the game engine. At least on my machine, the game wasn't asking more from my CPU or GPU to compensate for this, and that's why I think I was getting these drops. Act 3 was also where I saw most of the bugs too. These range from characters not returning to camp after cutscenes, and one in particular being lost just before the final battle, only to appear in the ending cutscene. Some companions fail to render at all in cutscenes, and I came across what I think is a bug with the chest of the mundane, that wouldn't turn items back from being spoons to their true form, but it did retain some of their original properties. While these bugs are certainly understandable, particularly in a game of this scale, it did mean I was saving very frequently and had to reload a lot. Act 1 and 2 were fairly solid, but I would recommend keeping a finger over F5 for quick save during the final act, as there's no telling when one of these will appear. On a related note, when I closed Baldur's Gate 3 at the end of the day, I left my PC on for 5 to 10 minutes afterwards so it could finish uploading all my save files. I genuinely created a lot of saves here as I was concerned about progress killing bugs. Thankfully, the ones I did get, I could work around and proceed. Overall, I was impressed with the graphical quality on display here, particularly when you take into account the sheer number of assets in the game. These aren't on the same level you'd expect from a modern AAA title. Character modelling, particularly for companion characters and key NPCs like Isabel, are very high quality, while environments and static objects are a step down, with the regular run-of-the-mill NPCs falling lower than that to acceptable. Nothing here looks bad, and at no point did I go through the game wishing it looked better. I felt similarly about sound design too, as this was fairly solid, but I struggled to pick a track that really stood out. All of the environmental overtures and music feel fine, and contribute to the ambient noise, which is designed to set an atmosphere. This was particularly evident in Act 2, but the strongest sound work in this game is by far the voice acting. The best word to describe Baldur's Gate 3 succinctly is immense. It's a dense and weighty game that I struggled to play in 10 to 12 hour blocks. A lot of the game's depth make it feel slower than it perhaps is, but by the same metric, each and every time I tried to turn it off and play something else, my brain couldn't be satisfied by that other game. This is the sort of title that wriggles its way into your head and stays there through every waking moment. I was replaying the decisions I'd made, I'd constantly be wondering what would have changed if I'd have selected the other option instead. If you've played this type of game before, you can sort of visualize in your mind how parts of the decision-making tree result in certain events. The true brilliance here is that you will still want to see how it plays out in-game. I won't go as far as to say Baldur's Gate 3 is the best game I've ever played. I can certainly find flaws in it, but I do think that a lot of those are inherited from the D&D rulebook, and the inevitable problems that arise in trying to take something fluid that can be changed by a human DM on the fly to a more rigid and logical formula as such exists in a computer game. What I would argue strongly is that this is the best choice-driven RPG, and the closest competition isn't even within touching distance of this. If, like me, you've been waiting 13 years for someone to come along and deliver a choice-driven RPG that can surpass Mass Effect 2, then this is it. Baldur's Gate 3 succeeded where many of its contemporaries failed, even their own Divinity 2. I think it speaks volumes that I'm excited even as I put this title down ahead of Fires of Rubicon. My mind is already wondering about what the game that inevitably dethrones this one will be like. Right now it's difficult to visualize because the bar for this genre just moved so much higher, so much quicker than I was expecting. But one day, I hope to be looking back on this game like I'm looking back on Mass Effect 2 today.
Recall that in time, all becomes dust and bone.